Hey, you. Yeah, the one who's been ignoring their HVAC system again this year? Don't spend another season hoping your furnace works. Be sure, with help from the team at Legacy. An annual tune-up keeps your furnace running safely and efficiently when you need it most. Visit LegacyHeatingandAirInc.com for online scheduling and special offers and discounts. While you're there, sign up for an annual maintenance plan starting at just $13 a month. Legacy Heating and Air, a Cook family business.
A Cook family business.
Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the weekly Notre Dame football show that runs all year long, usually on Monday nights at 7 o'clock. That's where we've been since basically the start of the football season, with a few little alterations for holidays and national championship games. I'm Eric Hansen. The guy in the other Brady Bunch square is Tyler James, and we're with you for roughly the next hour to talk about recruiting, some new offensive arrivals, new strength and conditioning coach, Loren Landow, who has a much fancier title than that. And we're also here to take your questions. We'll work them into our conversation. You have to do a whole bunch of other things like, subscribe, and that kind of stuff. And Tyler's better at telling you how to do that than I am, so listen to him.
Yeah, make sure you subscribe to our channel here, Inside ND Sports. We appreciate it. We do these weekly, like Eric mentioned. We have other content. If you are already subscribed, you've seen some of the press conference videos that we've put up from the discussions that we were able to have with the newcomers, and we'll have some more of those at the end of this week with the defensive guys getting a chance to talk to us, and any offensive guys that weren't able to make it on Friday. So subscribe to us here, like all the videos that you like. Help us out. Share this with your friends. Hit the bell for reminders, the notification bell, so you make sure that you get notifications for when we have content so you don't miss any of it. If you want to participate in the show by commenting or submitting questions, make sure you've clicked through to YouTube. You can't comment or submit questions to us if you're watching us embedded somewhere, whether it's on social media or InsideNDSports.com or any other place. If you're on a desktop version, the chat box should be to the right-hand side of us. If you're on a mobile version of some sort, you should see a chat area below our talking heads. So that should be all the basics you need to know about how to interact with us. If you are not a subscriber to InsideNDSports.com, we have a deal going for our YouTube audience that is a 30-day free trial. If you use promo code NDYT, when you use that code, you will get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage, and special access to us on the Insider Lounge, which is our premium message board where we spend all of our time and share all of our inside information first. There's a link to sign up for that deal in the video description. So that's the preamble from us. Eric, let's talk some Notre Dame football.
Okay, but after the show, you have to promise me how to unring the bell on all the things that my grandkids subscribe me to.
Okay.
Including something called the annoying orange, I think it is. So.
Wow. That sounds annoying.
It is. Okay. So where will we start today? Where we are going to start, we're going to take stock at Notre Dame after getting to know the offensive newcomers, the new football director of performance, Loren Landow, not Landau, as I had been saying it before meeting him. The Irish started spring semester classes and winter workouts 3 weeks ago and are closing in on the start of spring practice at a yet-to-be-released date in March. We do have the end date of spring practice. The Blue Gold game is set for 1 o'clock Eastern time on April 20th at Notre Dame Stadium. If you don't go to the stadium, the only way you can watch it is on Peacock. We are going to start, though, before we get into our opening drive, with some quasi-breaking news. Sunday night, 3-star defensive end C.J. May decommitted from the class. We had Tom Lemming on our podcast, longtime recruiting analyst. He seemed to suggest in the podcast that C.J. was a guy to keep an eye on because of a pull perhaps towards Auburn. Tyler, you did the story on Sunday night during the Grammys. Is there more to it than just other teams having an interest in him?
I mean, that's the main thing. Like he has continued to show interest in other teams, and they have shown interest in him. And so his recruitment has continued to go on. He wants to make visits. He's actually made 3 visits to Auburn since he's been committed to Notre Dame. And so CJ and Notre Dame had conversations about where this was going, and it was decided that he should withdraw his commitment and move on with his recruiting process. I think it makes sense for both sides. And this isn't necessarily something that blindsided Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been very active in recruiting other defensive ends, and already has 3 potential defensive ends committed in the class. So they are continuing to do that and recruit other guys. And so it's a loss, but it's still, Notre Dame is going to be okay. Like, it's nice. It was nice to have CJ May in the class. Rivals had him rated as a 3-star defensive end. I know others saw him more highly than that. The number 19 weak side defensive end in the 2025 class for Rivals, a 6'4", 225-pounder out of Highland Home, Alabama. So Notre Dame and CJ May have parted ways, and Notre Dame will figure out what its best options are to pursue forward. I think Damian Shanklin is obviously someone that Notre Dame has been on for a long time, and recruiting, and will continue to do so. They were out on the recruiting trail this past month, could see some of the other top options where they stand with the guys that had already been recruiting, and then identified some new ones that it can recruit now. So it's better to have this done with now than 6 months from now when Notre Dame's options would be more limited. So I think that all sort of played in the timing of it. He recently came up to campus and visited Notre Dame for the junior day, and then decided to go other ways.
All right. Well, you gave us a pretty good rundown of that. We're going to circle back to recruiting later in the show. Just wanted to get that out there. And we're going to do our opening drive, which is meeting the offensive newcomers. And we're going to start with Riley Leonard. Tyler, you did a story on Riley. Every one of us, I think, was around the big circle of life, circle of Riley's life on Friday. They kind of staggered the interviews so that he wasn't up there with a lot of people competing for attention. It was a good thing because he was really interesting. Mm-hmm. But let's start with what's going on with his health, since there was so much written and reported erroneously and correctly prior to a meeting with all of us on Friday. So where does his health stand right now?
Yeah, so he is currently doing workouts with Notre Dame. He's doing everything but sprinting because he had a tightrope surgery on his right ankle in January. He said 2 weeks ago. So we're closing in on 3 weeks here now. The decision was made once he came to Notre Dame and consulted with Notre Dame's doctors to have the surgery because of the way his ankle had healed, that there was a thought that he didn't need surgery, and you sort of wait to see how it healed. But the doctors determined that there would be a higher risk of injury if he didn't have this surgery, higher risk of re-injury. And so this surgery is supposed to help prevent a reoccurrence of that high ankle sprain that he had, which was the same ankle sprain that he suffered against Notre Dame when Howard Cross landed on his leg awkwardly. And Riley joked that Howard still owes him dinner for that.
He already had the restaurant picked out.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, he wants to go down to Ruth's Chris. So he, I don't know, maybe Riley Leonard actually has a Ruth's Chris NIL deal and wanted to fit that plug in there. But so yeah, he seemed in good spirits. I watched him come up the stairs to the interview session. We interviewed guys, the print reporters interview people on the second floor in the indoor athletics center for Notre Dame, and he sort of like bounced up them. It almost looked like he was doing it intentionally. I didn't ask him if he was trying to show off how healthy he was, but he did not look injured at all. He wasn't even in a walking boot or anything like that. So it looks like he's on track to be ready for spring. That's the plan, and he seems to be in good spirits as well.
I found him very engaging. One of the things that came up a lot of different times, and he had many, many answers for it, was why he picked Notre Dame and who with whom he consulted in making that decision. So what was kind of the most interesting part of that? Because there was a lot of tangents to that conversation.
Yeah, I don't know that there was like one specific reason why he picked Notre Dame. I think it was a combination of things. I think in general, his decision to go into the transfer portal was like, hey, I want to put myself in the best position to maximize this chance at the NFL that honestly he seemed pretty open about. He thought this time of year he would be preparing for the NFL draft now. He would have gone out last year, had a great year, and would be done with college after 3 years and trying out for the NFL right now. That didn't happen. The injury sort of reset his expectations and timeline of things. And so he looked into the transfer portal, and Notre Dame was what he found that he liked the most. He felt a pull to Notre Dame. He said he watched Rudy as a kid every day growing up. His great-grandfather played at Notre Dame, although I must say that I didn't find proof of that. Notre Dame has a list of everyone who's played in a game. Now, maybe he was on the team and never actually played. I don't know. I still need to do some more research to find out when exactly his great-grandfather played for Notre Dame. But he liked Marcus Freeman, the players. He actually liked Jared Parker, believe it or not, before Jared Parker left for Troy. But he also likes Mike Denbrock as well. Talked to a lot of people, and he knows a lot of people that have experience or connections to Notre Dame. The people with connections to Notre Dame would be David Cutcliffe, former Duke coach who was in line to be an offensive coordinator at Notre Dame before, Mike Elko and Chad Klunder, who were with him at Duke, who'd spent time at Notre Dame in the past. He even spent time talking to Sam Hartman about his experience, and he said he's had multiple conversations with Sam Hartman. David Morris is his quarterback trainer who has ties to guys that have come to Notre Dame before, and then consulted with all kinds of people back home in Fairhope, Alabama, whether it was his parents, his high school head coach, even some pastors. He's been leaning on all kinds of people for advice and how to handle things. So definitely seems like he didn't go into this blind and is seeking all sorts of feedback and advice as he can get to get the best out of the situation.
Yeah, one of the things I was amused with in his calculus about why Notre Dame was how impressed he was with Notre Dame's defense in the game where they played against each other. And then him finding out who was coming back. Oh, Riley Leonard, Howard Cross, Xavier Watts, Jack Kaiser. I mean, he named them by name of the guys coming back. So he was pretty excited that would be the complement to Notre Dame's offense. So what are your biggest takeaways and beyond what we've talked about? And did meeting Riley Leonard and getting to know him a little bit change at all your impression of him?
Yeah, well, so the defensive part was one of my biggest takeaways, that he was impressed by Notre Dame's defense and knowing what they had coming back, and that did play a role in his decision. I thought just how open he was about his injury was refreshing to me. Like, he could have been closed off, and he doesn't have to answer all those questions. He could have just been vague or
believe me, I know from experience.
Stuck to
another sport.
Stuck to a company line about it. But he explained the whole process and went through that. I like towards the end, we didn't get to follow up with him about it, but he sort of flatly described like that he knows his weaknesses. He said his weaknesses are loud and clear to him. Like, so he's well aware what they are. We didn't get to talk to him much about what he felt those are. But I'm hopefully we get a chance to hear from him about that. And my hunch is, based on the way the first conversation went, that he'd be pretty open and honest about that. I think just in general, it felt very different from what we had kind of become used to with Sam Hartman's media appearances. Sam Hartman a lot of times felt like he was on defense in interviews, and he was either trying to give other people credit or maybe pushing back on different things. And I think Sam Hartman came to Notre Dame a little bit jaded by his experiences with media. I think that informed that as well. But Riley Leonard was certainly open, engaged, and welcoming. Certainly that could change when it comes to season and some adversity hits. But I like the way he handled things. I thought the injury stuff, he was even like I mentioned, the Howard Cross joke, he was laughing off some of that stuff. And I don't know that Sam Hartman would have handled it the same way. Not that means anything necessarily in how he will have success on the football field, but from our perspective and someone that we're dealing with and trying to get to know and trying to let fans know him better, it was a bit refreshing.
Yeah, they seem like very, very different personalities. I was very lucky in the summertime. I caught Sam Hartman on a great day where he was very open and very engaging. But in general, you're right. It felt like you were kind of pushing and getting a little bit of pushback in some of the press conference that we had him in. To his credit, we asked some dumb questions sometimes.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. So do we want to roll into CJ Carr? Do you want to take a few questions before we
don't have many questions yet, so we can go into, well, let's talk about CJ Carr, but if you have questions, please submit them to us and we'll get to them after we're done talking about CJ.
Okay. So CJ Carr came in later, and in fairness perspective, there were other people choices to interview when he came up. But in general, when there's been somebody that's that high rated of a recruit, there is a huge demand to talk to him. And it was a little bit more subdued with him. And I really thought that he conducted himself very well. I had only talked to him one-on-one once before he came to Notre Dame, and he was impressive then. And I thought he was very mature in the way he handled himself with the media. So Tyler, you were there, I know, at least for part of it. What are your expectations about what he can get accomplished this spring? Because he'll come in as number 4.
Yeah, I think it's just about getting a sense for everything, learning the playbook, developing chemistry with receivers, learning how Gino Guidugli wants him to do things, how Mike Denbrock wants him to do things. I think it's just more about just sort of getting that experience than it is about anything sort of tangible of like, this is where he will be on the depth chart, or this is what the timeline should be for when he'll be the next starting quarterback at Notre Dame. I just think it's about getting this experience, getting as much action as is possible. I know that it may be difficult with 4 quarterbacks, so we'll see how much progress he can make. But I think even without the reps, there's still plenty of things to learn as he goes through his first spring practices with Notre Dame. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good measuring stick, and I think that's where his head is, having talked to him. That he's just trying to get better. He's not worried about the depth chart right now, and just realistically, from having watched the springs where there is a legitimate competition going on between number 1 and number 2, number 3 can get lost, and I'm thinking, what's number 4 going to get? Now, that's not uniform throughout. I think with the Everett Golson, the last Everett Golson, Malik Zaire competition, where Everett ended up transferring to Florida State after spring when he might have won the job, Deshaun Kaiser got nothing, and it showed up in the spring game. I mean, he looked awful in the blue gold game. But, we'll see how creative they are in being able to get reps for him and so forth. Again, given what they already have on the roster, given what the situation is, and if everybody's healthy and everybody stays, would you still expect to see him as the number 4 guy going into the Texas A&M game in the season opener on August 31st in Carter Carl's land?
Yeah, I mean, if everyone stays, I think that would be the most likely scenario. I don't necessarily think that everyone staying is the most likely scenario. So if you maybe like pick, regardless of the qualifiers, just what is he come the season opener, I would say 3rd string, just because of the chance of someone transferring out existing. I just don't think it's necessarily a given that he passes up Kenny Minchie right away. I think Kenny Minchie is a capable quarterback as well. And obviously it would be, I would think, very hard to pass up Steve Angeli, given his experience last season. So I think he'll probably be 4th if all 4 guys are there, but I don't know that necessarily means a lot in terms of what his future ends up becoming. What do you think? Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think his mindset too. I mean, I think he wants to be ready for 2024, but I think his mindset is looking at 2025 as the timeline that he's more concerned with, being ready to be competing for an open job in 2025 and putting himself in position for that. So I think that's where his head is. Anything else jump out at you about him in the time that you were eavesdropping?
No, he was about what I expected. I mean, I've had enough experiences and seen enough interviews with him. Definitely a polished kid. I asked him about what I think is interesting is like CJ Carr has been sort of the next big thing for quite some time now. And how do you continue to get better when you're sort of in that situation? I mean, his recruitment was settled for so long. How much growth has there been for him as a recruit? How does he continue to push himself that? Now this coming to Notre Dame puts him in the complete opposite position now. He's got to earn everything. Not that he didn't earn everything he got before, but he's got to start all over and get himself in a position to compete, to be a starter in the future. So I think CJ Carr, at least as a person, is who I think we've all come to expect to know. Now, obviously, fans might not have that perspective on him yet, but I think he's going to handle everything the right way as things play out moving forward. What stood out to you?
How many questions he got about Michigan?
Yeah, it was like a couple of different rounds. Like it was early on, and there was more people. I was like, "Oh, come on, guys, we already talked to him about Michigan. What's going on?"
Yeah, he rooted for Michigan. His grandpa coached there. His dad played there. It's okay. He's not thinking about Michigan. In fact, he drew the analogy. He thinks that Notre Dame can do what Michigan did. So he said all the right things about Michigan as far as I'm concerned. But the other thing that was kind of interesting was his take on Loren Landow, who we'll get into it here in a little bit, the new director of football performance, and how impressed he was with the individualized by position group the workouts are. And now he doesn't have a point of reference of having Matt Balis, although I'm sure that he's been around and had met Matt Balis and had met Fred Hale. I mean, he's been around almost since Paul Longo was the guy. It seems like around Notre Dame's program. But just that perspective was interesting, that he was able to pinpoint that and really see how that was beneficial.
I also thought it was kind of funny how he was like, it's so great to have this indoor facility. Like I'm used to not being able to do anything this time of year in Michigan. And so I think it's probably something I know I hadn't really given much thought to, but those guys have access to that indoor facility and they can do all kinds of stuff, which isn't sort of odd or rare or that special on a college campus, but it is a different thing when you're used to sort of a much different setup as a high schooler.
So we'll move on to Kris Mitchell. Notre Dame will have 9 wide receivers in spring practice. They'll have another couple join them to bring that number to 11 in June when Logan Saldate and Bo Collins enroll. Bo is a transfer from Clemson who's taking classes remotely in South Bend to finish up his Clemson degree. Logan is out in California finishing up his high school commitments out there. So what were your initial impressions of Kris Mitchell, and are you buying the thoughts of him being an elite speed guy?
Yeah, I mean, he looks fast on film. And so that's why I asked him flat out, what's your 40? And he had an answer. A lot of times guys won't even say an answer. They're like, I don't know. And that's, to me, it's not a good sign because I feel like most guys do know. They just don't want to say what it is. He said he runs a 4.3 and he's trying to get to a 4.2, which, I mean, I don't know. Some guys, when they talk about their speed, they might be exaggerating a little bit. It might be like sort of like heights. Guys tend to lie about how tall they are sometimes too. So maybe he's not.
Marcus Burton told me on the phone he was 6'1", the point guard for Notre Dame's basketball team, who I don't think is maybe not even 5'11", but we'll see. That's what
so. I mean, we'll have more opportunities to see how that speed translates. I also asked GPS wise because I mean, those are measured too in practices and in games, depending on he actually told me he didn't wear them in games, the device that tracked the speed, because he thought it was distracting. But he said he was tracked at 22 miles per hour in practice. as his fastest speed, and that topped all the wide receivers that were at the Senior Bowl. What they did in practices leading up to the Senior Bowl. So not to say that none of those guys in the Senior Bowl have ever hit 22 in a different practice, but at least in their NFL audition going against top competition, didn't hit that speed. So will he be able to hit those speeds? Will he be able to live up to that speed at Notre Dame? We'll see. The evidence that I would point to that's like, okay, there's something to his speed is that he was a deep threat target for FIU last year and made the most of that. He was only one of five players caught more deep ball targets and deep ball being qualified as 20 plus yards, according to Pro Football Focus.
Five players nationally. Yeah. FBS receivers that did that. And 4 of the 5 are expected to be first round picks in the NFL draft. Rome Odunze from Washington, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, UCF's Javon Baker, who I wasn't terribly familiar with, if I'm being honest, and Ohio State's Marvin Harrison Jr. Everyone but Baker being the 4 guys that are potential first-round draft picks in April. And worth noting, hey, that guy that was the LSU offensive coordinator is at Notre Dame too. Now maybe Notre Dame doesn't have Jaden Daniels at quarterback, but or quite frankly those receivers. But Kris Mitchell had success last year with the freshman quarterback at FIU. And we'll see if he can elevate himself to an even higher level here at Notre Dame with Riley Leonard. The one thing I really like about him, besides his hair, I think he has cool hair. And that's, if you've not seen it, it's kind of piled up and looks like it's going to explode, is that he dramatically improved every year he was at Florida International. His numbers were better, and he just got better and better. He definitely comes off as a confident guy. Do you think he can be Notre Dame's number 1 receiver? And if he is, what does that mean? Does that mean everybody else isn't that good, or is that a good sign that his speed is translating?
I would say it's a good sign. First, like, I think he can be the number 1 receiver. I mean, it depends. Like, how do we want to measure that? Is it reception? Is it receiving yards? I think there's a chance that maybe Jaden Thomas has more receptions, but maybe Kris Mitchell has more receiving yards. We'll see. We'll see how that all plays out. But if Kris Mitchell is at the top in either of those categories, that means that he's a big play threat. If he's the leading receiver, if he's able to get that enough catches to lead Notre Dame in receptions, I would think that would make Notre Dame's offense more dynamic. Unless he becomes like they just throw a bunch of screens to him. But I don't think that's going to be the best way to utilize Kris Mitchell. And so I would imagine if he ends up being Notre Dame's leading receiver, that is a good sign for Notre Dame's offense. Now, obviously, if he's up there by himself and everyone else has 20 catches, now maybe that's not great. But I do think overall his ascendance could be a good sign for Notre Dame's offense. What are your thoughts on his potential and what that would mean for Notre Dame's offense?
Well, I mean, if he is Notre Dame's number 1 receiver, I do think it's a good thing. And I think it's going to help everybody else in the offense if he is.
Right.
Because Notre Dame's offense, when that field receiver has been somebody that can run by cornerbacks, that opens up other things in Notre Dame's offense. It opens up their running game. It opens up the boundary receiver a little bit, because defensive coordinators have to decide, okay, am I going to move a safety over to this side of the field to deal with Will Fuller or Kevin Stefferson or whoever it is, that, or can I just do what teams did last year and deal with Tobias Merriweather and not really worry that much? Rico Flores played that position some last year, and at the end of the year, he was more of a handful. But even then, I don't know that he was a guy that was running by cornerbacks.
Right.
And so having an elite speed guy who can catch the ball, I think would open up things for other people, and it would be really good for Notre Dame's offense. So really eager to see. Now they have some other possible options there. I mean, Cam Williams is a taller receiver, although not that much taller, I guess, than Kris is about 6'6", right?
Yeah, I think he described himself as 6 foot, but then he's listed as 6'1". So, I don't know which one is more accurate. What he said. Usually, guys don't say they're shorter than they are. So, I would imagine he is only 6 foot.
Cam Williams is 6'2". I mean, there have been 5 wide receivers signed by Notre Dame in the Rivals era, which goes all the way back to 2002, that were top 50 overall recruits, and he's one of them. Mm-hmm. And yet he admits route running is going to be a big part of his evolution during spring, during the summer, during training camp. That's where he has to get better. Micah Gilbert is, I would think, is going to start out at that side. Field not as fast as those other two, and then
I think he's a boundary receiver personally, but the need is on the field side.
Yeah, the need is on the field side, and then KK Smith, we think, will be looked at maybe on the outside. He'll be a sophomore this year. He played 1 snap in the Sun Bowl. He was injured, or he was recovering from surgery pretty much all season from shoulder surgery, so he didn't play very much. Really thin kid, supposedly very fast. We really never saw him run because he had the sling on his shoulder, or he was rehabbing his shoulder the last practices that we saw. So there's a lot of good options there. It's going to be a real fun spring, and it's a really important position group for Notre Dame to get better under Mike Denbrock and Mike Brown. So,
all right, okay. I'm going to throw in some questions here, and I'll get us one is a Loren Landow question, so it'll lead us into our discussion about him. First, Jeffrey Stevens, and thanks, Jeffrey, for asking multiple questions. When do you get access to Marcus Freeman?
I would think, I don't know that we're going to have access to him until right before spring practice, because Notre Dame's not going to sign anybody in February during the February signing day that used to be so big. I don't know that they'll roll him out for that. I mean, they're in a recruiting dead period, so they could have him. Another possibility, so obviously I don't know. The answer is I don't know. But another possibility is maybe rolling him out when they introduce Mike Denbrock to the media. Now that he's off the road recruiting, I would imagine we'll get a shot to talk to him sometime in February. So that's my guess. Right. But if we don't talk to him in February, then it'll be right before spring practice starts.
Yeah, we're supposed to talk to him some more players on this coming Friday. He was not on that list. Notre Dame could certainly change that, but we don't have an answer yet. But hopefully it's soon. But this time of year is weird because people want to know stuff from the coaches. It's like the coaches aren't the one that know everything. I'd rather talk to Loren Landow every week this time of year than the coaches, because he's more in touch with what's going on and seeing these guys and what they're up to. So I don't know if Marcus Freeman will get in the weight room with those guys, and maybe he'll have some in-person interactions with them.
Loren said he'd made an appearance. Now, again, he hasn't been around that much to do it because he's been recruiting, but he said that he was impressed at what a good worker he was.
All right. Next question is from Jeffrey Stevens again. It appears Groundhog Day has passed without a finalization of the 2024 schedule. Any news on when this will be official?
It was supposed to happen before Groundhog Day. So I would say any day now, but Notre Dame and its timelines are kind of like asking kids when their homework's going to be done, your own kids. So I would expect it to get done here soon. There's no reason. I mean, they are letting people buy or apply for season tickets without them knowing exactly what's the schedule. Mm-hmm. But I would expect we'll know here very soon.
All right, Edgar Quillard asks, how does Pro Football Focus come up with their ratings and who does it? I have read that my football in the know folks say the rankings don't always correlate to success at the next level.
Do you want to start with that, or do you want me to jump in there?
I can start with that. Pro Football Focus has its own folks who evaluate film, and they have a grading system on, I think it's like, I want to say it's -2 to 2 based on like if a guy does what they think he's supposed to do and how well he does it, or how unwell he does, how poorly he does that. And so they try to grade every play, every player on every play, and then they sort of tally that up and they have a whole formula that they do for all of that, which is like that is a similar way to how coaches evaluate film, right? Now, obviously, they're not the coach. They don't know necessarily what the play is, what they're being coached to do. The idea is that these are smart football people that know what they're doing. Now, my guess, I don't really know this. I haven't gone in the weeds. Like, I would imagine that they're better, quote unquote, analysts are doing like Notre Dame games, whereas like maybe they don't have the top notch guy doing the Marshall film on a weekly basis. Maybe that's why. What's his name?
Jaden Harrison.
No. The offensive lineman, Kane Madden, was rated so well, and then he didn't rate nearly as well at Notre Dame. But I mean, you're right. Like it's not intended, even though the name Pro Football Focus makes it seem like it's a pro projection. It started as a pro thing. They were grading pro players, and that's where the name came from. But it's not necessarily like the highest graded. Although like Joe Alt, he is very highly graded offensive tackle. He is also a highly coveted recruit and likely to be a first round or even top 10 pick. So that it doesn't always correlate. I think from my perspective, I use it as just sort of like another way to sort of check in on opinions of people. I think some of the stuff like I was mentioning the stats earlier about Kris Mitchell, like that's great stuff. Like I wouldn't necessarily have access to that information because they have people that are charting all this stuff. And that's the stuff I like the best about it. The ratings we can argue about, like they might rate a guy higher than I feel he deserved during a game. I mean, it's only so much objectivity can go into it. So I think that that's probably the best way to describe everything. I don't know if I missed anything there, Ed. Eric, what did I make any sense there? Or did I ramble on? You tell me what I miss.
Well, you rambled, but it was good rambling. What I'll add is I think what's really valuable for us beyond the grades is the snap counts because they get those right. And that's something, even if you go back and watch the game, would be really tedious to make sure that you got everybody's snap counts right. It's very valuable to us. They do 2 sets of rankings. They'll do one overnight, Saturday night to Sunday, and have them ready for Sunday morning. And that's usually from the TV copy. And then they'll get the 22 copy. They'll get where you can see all 22 players and you can see everything a lot better. And they will kind of adjust those ratings up or down. And sometimes there are significant changes, like Charles Jagas' Sun Bowl performance went from best lineman to one of the worst linemen that played on Notre Dame that day, but it was still interesting. I think it's just one tool to evaluate, so it's not the end-all be-all. Like if you say, well, Xavier Watts wasn't ranked one of the top safeties in the country by Pro Football Focus, and it's hard for me to see. And yet they're pretty consistent with certain players. They love Jack Kaiser. Jack Kaiser ended up being one of the top rated linebackers. And he has every year that he's been a regular for Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. He's been one of their highest rated. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. I've talked to people like, I won't say, but somebody that is a offensive line connoisseur who thinks it's garbage. And I've talked to other people that say they do a pretty good job. So again, I always try to preface it. This is one evaluative tool, but by no means the definitive evaluative tool.
Yeah. And if you think about it, if one person is giving the grades for does that same person know as much about offensive line play as they know about receiver play?
And how much caffeine have they had?
And
doing it overnight.
If they're this smart, is this why wouldn't they actually be a coach, right? I don't know. You could, but also it's probably a better lifestyle.
Why aren't we coaches?
Well, yeah, it's a better lifestyle. You don't have to recruit. But anyways, any opinion can be dissected, and that's all this is. It's an opinion. Like, obviously it's very stat based and film based, but it's still an opinion at the end of the day. All right, we want to talk about Loren Landow. So let's get that conversation started by a question that John Murray submitted here. Do you expect that the new strength and conditioning coach will have a positive effect on keeping more players healthy?
Well, you're never going to be perfect with that, because even if they were robots, they would need new parts, or things would break and so forth. But they're certainly leaning as much as they can in the direction of being on the cutting edge of recovering, being on the cutting edge of injury prevention, sports science. Loren Landow is really in lockstep with John Waggle, who came aboard in May of 2022. His title is Associate Athletic Director, but he's works with sports performance, and so they really lean into, as much as they can, the science about things. And this is something that Loren mentioned, that Marcus Freeman is also in agreement here. So if Loren and John say, you know what, we need to back off on these guys a little bit today, he's going to listen to them. He's not going to fight them on that and say, the heck with that. They gave up, 30 points to Purdue. They need to practice for 4 hours today as punishment. So I think all those factors make it more positive that players will max out being healthy as much as they can.
Yeah, I know when he was first hired, just looking into him and just doing, frankly, just Google searches, there was some stuff about from his time with the Broncos that people had come up with some studies that suggested that maybe the Broncos were more injury prone when he was the strength and conditioning coordinator out there. I think it's probably hard to draw a direct correlation to that. And I think there's probably all sorts of caveats, and I can't pretend to know exactly what was happening with the Denver Broncos during those years, or if it had anything to do with Loren Landow. It could have been related to the guys that they were signing and how injury prone that they may have been. I think there's all kinds of things that can go into that. So I think that's my perspective on that. I don't know there's any way to guarantee either way what's going to happen. But I think as long as you're exhibiting like sound sports science and being smart about it and trying to make sure that the coaches are also buying into what he's telling them, because if he's saying, hey, maybe Marcus Freeman's on board, but say the wide receivers coach is saying, no, we need to run a bunch more deep routes today. Like, these guys need to get action doing that. And if that's not what's happening, maybe those guys are in position to get injured in some way or something like that. So there's all kinds of variables that can be involved, but certainly the hope is that he's not going to impact Notre Dame in a negative way. But I think it's also hard to like guarantee that it would sort of make a positive impact either. Because my perspective on this is that fans lack perspective on this. It's like whenever something happens to your team, you have no idea how many ACLs are being torn or how many ankles are being torn, tweaked, or hamstrings are being pulled from another team, because you just don't follow other teams that closely. And so you always feel like it's happening so much worse for your team when a lot of times it might just be the same as everyone else.
Well, I'll tell you, whoever works with the women's basketball team definitely takes a beating in that area.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So Eric, you spent between the two of us more time talking to Loren than I did. What was the most important thing that you learned from him? And how different does it seem he approaches things than Matt Balis did?
I would say they take a very different path to the same end. They have very different personalities. He is not Matt Balis 2.0, nor is he asked to be. When Brian Kelly hired Matt Balis after their disastrous 4-8 season in 2016, he not only was hired to revolutionize their strength and conditioning program, and he did very well. He was asked to help build leadership, asked to build culture, and he did. A lot of the ideas Marcus Freeman still uses, Brian Kelly used until the end, like the off-season accountability teams they call SWAT teams. That was Matt Bayless's idea. The hungry, starving, satisfied board, that was Matt Bayless's idea. I think Loren doesn't have as much and admitted as much. He isn't the driver of that. He is taking his cues from Marcus Freeman in that sense. So here's a guy that's worked with UFC fighters, Olympians, Major League Baseball, NFL, and NBA players, all different kinds, and he's coming to a college setting. He has some ideas about how to maximize the culture, but again, it's up to Marcus Freeman to set it. That's a big difference. He's definitely not, well, I mean, in his own words, I'm not a yell at the top of my lungs guy, nor am I a you're going to run through a wall for me kind of guy. I did see in the highlights that were on Twitter today that other people are yelling in the weight room, but Loren isn't one of them. So again, it's his personality. Another big difference, and this is the one that I think Marcus Freeman was most excited about, was something CJ Carr, I mentioned about CJ Carr early, tailoring the workouts to position groups, tailoring the workouts to individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Again, our point of reference so far is people that are newcomers. They're new to Notre Dame and they're new to Loren. And obviously we had Ryan Harris, who had worked with Loren when he was a pro player and beyond. But when we get people that can make that Bayless, Loren Landow comparison, players that have been on the team for a while, then I think we'll get an interesting comparison there. But impressive guy. I mean, he definitely is able to articulate his goals. He definitely walked in the door saying, I've got to prove myself to these guys. I haven't done anything for you yet.
Right.
And so I'm going to prove myself. My resume means nothing to you. And so let's work together. So very interesting guy. And I hope to have more conversations with him, not just once in a hiring conversation.
Yeah. What the best way for strength and conditioning coach, especially, like the proof is in the results, right? Like if I'm a freshman football player and I want to buy into what he's doing, if he's making me faster and stronger, more flexible, I'm like, okay, this is working. So even now, like a month in, like there might not be drastic results to see yet. So even if we talk to guys that, like, say, for instance, like Jack Kaiser, who's been just in the program for so long that he has a good perspective of everyone and everything, he might not necessarily be able to speak as strongly about what Loren Landow is doing because it's a process. Like strength and conditioning doesn't happen overnight. And any sort of changes that he may be implementing may be slow to take at first. But I think there'll be an understanding. And I think the culture carryover from guys like Jack Kaiser can matter too. Like those guys can set the standard rather than having to rely on Loren Landow to do that. So
the one thing I didn't hear from guys, and I a lot of them were asked about Loren, and they all had positive things. They didn't feel like this was overly taxing on them. They didn't feel like, I remember 2 years ago, Aiden Gobira called the workouts gruesome. And he meant, I think, grueling, but he called them gruesome. And it was more of a kind of smack you in the face kind of culture shock winter workouts. So I'm not saying that they're necessarily easier, but you're not getting that culture shock kind of other than the natural differences between high school and college.
Yeah, and it could be a different way of approaching things. Like maybe Matt Bayless does his like more taxing workout like early on, and like I know Matt Bayless he would have like themed workouts. Like there was like a Valentine's Day massacre weight lifting a day that I don't think was a fun time for those guys. And so he sort of would build in sort of themes to that. And I think I'm interested to see like how that Loren Landow integrates that kind of stuff, which may seem sort of corny or cheesy from the outside sometimes, but I think can matter for guys that are trying to buy into things and getting guys working together and doing stuff like that. So we'll see how his message resonates and sort of how his structure influences how these guys are progressing and buying into what he's doing.
So the first time I met Matt Bayless was during I got a chance to spend a work day with Brian Kelly. We didn't like put on our jammies and watch movies together or anything later in the day, but
Jim Harbaugh would have done that with you though.
There you go. But I spent the work day with him. And so we're up in Kelly's office and we go down to the weight room, and from outside the weight room, I can hear this bass, boom, boom, boom. And it's Van Halen, Running with the Devil, and it's full blast. And there's nobody else in there but him. And he's just like this, shakes my hand. His voice is already rasping. I don't know who he had been yelling at, but just a really intense guy, but a guy I have a lot of respect for. So again, there's different ways to get to the same goal. And I asked Loren if he had a rasp, and he said no.
Yeah. I think Matt Bayless's rasp is just permanent now. That's years and years of damage to his voice. That is put his voice into that state. One thing that I was very important and valuable that you had found out following talking to Loren Landow was what his staff looks like. Can you fill in our viewers that maybe didn't read your story? Shame on them if they haven't. No, right. I'll kidding aside. Who's on his staff? Who's working with him in terms of the strength and conditioning stuff?
Yeah, he brought in 2 guys and he kept 2 guys, and he kept Fred Hale, who was the interim between when Matt Bayless left in July.
Right.
And then he also kept, I'm going to have to look up the new names. No problem. But he brought in 2. So there's 4 assistants. And I think that's good. You have some continuity, guys that know the players, especially Fred. And then you have 2 new guys that he had worked with both in his past. One of them had been at Washington State this past year. One worked. Loren has his own sports performance company in Denver, and a guy that had worked there with him. So Fred Hale and Tony Fusco are from Bayless's staff. Richard Garascio and Travis Duffel are the newcomers. So we'll get to know them a little bit more. But Richard has probably more background in working in a college setting, while Travis, it looked like his background was more in Loren's business. So he's working with all kinds of pro athletes and Olympic sports people. So I think that's a pretty good blend.
All right. Is there anything else on the Landow front that we haven't hit you think we need to discuss?
I think one thing that I didn't include the story, I put it on the board, I couldn't work it into the story, was his approach to the mental side of it, because I think that's really important. When you look at how teams perform in the fourth quarters, it's not just a physical training and endurance, it's their mental training. And he talked about that, there's certain qualities that give way when you're fatigued. Your balance and your bend give way when you're fatigued. So they really work on that aspect of realizing that and being locked in mentally. And so, again, it's going to be, as we get into spring practice, it's going to be interesting. For the first time in a long time, I'm going to pay attention during the stretching period.
All right.
To see if that's different, other than Marcus coming up to everybody and giving them a pat.
All right. I wanted to talk quickly about Eric Goins. I know we're getting late in the hour here, so we want to talk some recruiting as well. I know we have some recruiting questions. But first, I have this question from Michael McFadden on the recruiting front. Michael says, sorry, guys, I should know this by now, but are we /ND expecting any new recruits? on Wednesday, February 7th. Thanks. Great discussion again. Michael, no, Notre Dame is not expecting, and Wednesday, February 7th, if anyone's wondering why he's asking that, that's when National Signing Day is. That's the second signing period for football, but Notre Dame is no longer recruiting anyone else in the 2024 class, which has become basically the
late
routine
signing period
for Notre Dame. Well, no, it's the routine. Like that's not a change. Like this is how it's this is how it's changed over the last few years, is that Notre Dame basically signs everyone in December, and there isn't much of the late recruitments that Notre Dame is in the running for. So
no more fake phone calls in February.
No more fake phone calls in February. Notre Dame is all in on the 2025 class moving forward right now.
Okay, so as we move into recruiting, or did we have more questions?
No more questions.
Okay. So where does the class stand now without CJ May? Are they still the number one class in 2025?
Yeah, Notre Dame's still the number one class with 13 commitments. Notre Dame's star average actually improved because he was one of the 3-star commits in the class. Now Notre Dame only has 2, Ka'o Kia and Will Black. Notre Dame still has 3 defensive end commits, Joseph Reif and Christopher Burgess, who are defensive ends on according to the Rivals ratings and rankings. And Dominic Hulak is listed as a linebacker, but it's more of a Viper prospect for Notre Dame. So Notre Dame will continue to recruit other defensive ends. I mentioned Damian Shanklin earlier, Julian Marks, Darren Kinnigbon. I need to learn how to say his name. And our guys that Notre Dame had previously offered that they're continuing to recruit, Ethan Utley and Javion Campbell, are 2 new offers. I think there's a chance that maybe Utley and Marks end up as being defensive tackles on the next level. But Notre Dame is continuing to recruit those guys. And then Campbell actually visited Notre Dame this past Thursday. So didn't wait long after getting an offer from Notre Dame to get up on campus.
One of Notre Dame's top targets is set to announce his college decision on Thursday. 4-star offensive tackle Owen Strebig from Wisconsin. What do you think about Notre Dame's chances, and who else is competing with the Irish?
Yeah, I like Notre Dame's chances. I've had a future cast in Notre Dame's favor for Owen since July, which might be probably the longest standing future cast that I've made. His final 5 are Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Miami, USC, and Florida State. I would probably list them in order in terms of favorites in like likelihood of where he ends up committing. Wisconsin and Miami have made strong pushes here down the stretch as well. But yeah, a top offensive tackle target, ranked the number 6 offensive tackle in the country by Rivals in the 2025 class, number 66 overall, 6'8", 295-pound kid out of Wisconsin, is announcing on Thursday, and we'll see if Notre Dame can finish there and get his commitment and keep things rolling in that 2025 class.
And for people that are really only casual recruiting consumers, Chad Bowden's name probably doesn't pop up a lot. It did this last week because Michigan was trying to make overtures and get Notre Dame's director of recruiting away from Notre Dame. He ends up deciding to stay with Notre Dame. How significant is this, both for the casual and the hardcore recruiting fan?
Yeah, it's definitely significant. He's a big part of Notre Dame's recruiting success. Has been with Marcus Freeman since his days at Cincinnati, and decided to remain loyal to Marcus Freeman rather than take a attractive offer from Michigan. And I think it's important. He's not just, even if you don't follow recruiting that closely, you've probably seen Chad Bowden in, whether it's a leprechaun suit, a CIA suit attire. He's always doing something goofy to like have a fun time with the recruits when they're on campus. He's dressed up as a referee before, I think. So he does all kinds of things. He
showed up at the airport with a boombox.
Yeah, showed up to the airport with a boombox. Yeah, I think he's made some enemies.
I don't even know what that song's called. I call it the Chad Bowden music because they play it on 3rd or 4th down at the stadium.
Yeah, I think I call it the Six Flags song because I feel like they played it for Six Flags a lot, but I don't even know what the name of the song is either. And so, yeah, he's a big energy guy. Like the recruits love him. he knows all the recruits really well. They know him really well. He talks to everyone. A lot of times he may be the first guy that they talk to from Notre Dame. He's very active and out front, and even in the transfer portal, like some of these guys, like Kris Mitchell and Jaden Harrison, like that. I think they said that Chad was the first person they spoke to once they got in the portal from Notre Dame. So he plays a big role in communicating with these guys, getting to know them, finding out what makes them tick. He's also an evaluator as well, so he has an input on who Notre Dame is going after, and it has a staff that helps him with that. And so we'll see how his sort of role will expand. I imagine it will expand in some way here moving forward, but I don't know what exactly that'll look like, what sort of title that will bring him. Notre Dame historically,
you won't have to cut Marcus Freeman's lawn anymore.
Yeah, Notre Dame historically, I found they don't like new titles in the athletic department, so sometimes it could be a little bit slow process to whether he's the general manager or something else. He's the director of recruiting now, and we'll see what it changes to. Even if he has the same title, his role might be expanding. So definitely a big retainment and recruiting win for Notre Dame to keep him away from Michigan.
Quickly, before you make one last sweep for questions or comments or whatever, the Senior Bowl was Saturday. We were both off, but I think we caught at least glimpses of it. There were 5 Notre Dame players in the game. Javonte Jean-Baptiste was on the losing American team, and then there was the 4 guys on the national team, 2 linebackers, Maris Leofau and J.D. Bertrand, Cam Hart at cornerback, Sam Hartman at quarterback, although some people might have thought he was playing for the American team when he threw the ball to the Louisville defensive back. Any quick thoughts on how those guys performed at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't see much of it besides clips, so I don't know I have any thoughts about it. It's just,
well, I hope Cam Hart isn't injured, though.
Yeah, I did see that, and hopefully maybe he just aggravated his shoulder or it was something minor, and it was enough to not continue playing after he made a tackle, because obviously he's had shoulder issues throughout his career, and I think that's going to be something that he has to answer to and get poked and prodded about as it relates to the NFL combine and all that stuff, to make sure that he has a clean bill of health and what his chances of staying healthy are. But yeah, another step in the process for those guys. We'll find out who makes the NFL combine list. Probably it has to be here sometime soon. It's early.
What will come out, that or the Notre Dame 2024 football schedule first? We should have a pool.
Given the track record, I'd probably say the combine at this point. So that JD Bertrand I think was the best based statistically. I didn't see much of his actual performance, but
he had a good week of practice.
Good week of practice. He was named the best linebacker for his team by his teammates. I think it was the running backs and the offensive linemen that went against him were the ones who voted for him. A lot of those guys I think put up impressive GPS numbers in terms of their speed in practices as well. So a good showing for Notre Dame overall. And JD Bertrand's, he's gonna do everything he can to make someone say no to drafting him, because I think he's just the kind of guy that doesn't have a lot of the things that you would say that is an NFL linebacker, but he plays like one from time to time. So we'll see what happens for all those guys. I wanted to mention Eric Goins, who I wrote a story about. He is a 30-year-old former Army officer who joined Notre Dame's football program for the 2024 season. He actually enrolled at Notre Dame last summer in August, but he wasn't able to make it happen fast enough to get here and join the team. And so he's able to play because he played 4 seasons at the Citadel, but he still had 1 season of eligibility left because he redshirted as a freshman, and your eligibility clock freezes for folks who are in active duty. And he was in the Army for 7 years, and we came back to Notre Dame to be an MBA student, and is working on that. And a very interesting story. If you haven't read that story, I'd encourage you to look for it, because it's pretty cool to see what he did for our country, in his decision to give football one last try.
Do you think he'll ever get into a game? Mitch Jeter was recruited to be Spencer Schrader's replacement.
Maybe he can carve out like a kickoff role or something. I don't know. I'm certainly not a kicking savant. I think Notre Dame is very confident in Mitch Jeter, and that was why they went after him. But Marty Biaggi was certainly welcoming to having Eric on board and getting him in there and finding a way that he can, whether it's just providing some leadership and experience and some valuable lessons that way. I think it's a good ad for Notre Dame as a walk-on to some guy who's shown a lot of leadership and courage already in his life as a 30-year-old.
Do we have any last straggling questions?
Jeffrey Stevens wants to place your bets on the Super Bowl. Who you got, San Francisco or Kansas City?
Well, they've come this far, so I'm going to go with Kansas City at this point. And I will bet that the Ramones will not get any airtime as anybody's boyfriend or girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean,
the Ramones are my favorite group.
Eric, I mean, it was years ago. Taylor Swift was just a superstar when I first told you how great she was, and now she's a mega super duper star. So don't you feel like you had an opportunity to join the Taylor Swift bandwagon before everyone else did?
Well, until she was a mega mentor on The Voice, she was nothing to me. She has to make an appearance on The Voice, and then, hey, I mean, I love music, but I am so behind the time with technology. I heard the new Billy Joel song, the first single he's had in over 30 years. And I went to his website. I don't even know how to purchase music anymore. And what did I find on the website? I could buy a vinyl.
A vinyl, yeah.
And it's like, well, wait a second. I mean, I don't know. I can listen to it on YouTube for free all I want, but I was trying to be, conscientious because I know Billy Joel probably needs the money.
Yeah, he makes money off the ads on YouTube, just like we make money off the ads on YouTube too. Now it's obviously not the same as buying actual music, but most people don't buy physical music or even digital music much. I don't. I mean, I have a subscription to Spotify, and so I just add whatever.
Is that how the artists make money? Is they get a cut of that?
It's very small. I mean, most of their money is coming from touring these days, or music videos on YouTube. Like they can make money off of that, or even if it's on a music video, they can just put a video.
And they get free tickets to football games.
Okay. Yeah. So that's it for how does the music industry work. I should give my Super Bowl prediction. I'll go with I'll go with the 49ers just to be opposite of Eric. I think it's hard to go against Patrick Mahomes, but I won't be disappointed either way. I don't dislike either team. I really like. I hope it's actually a good defensive game. I want to see some big plays, but I think both those defenses are pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see how they match up against those opposing offenses.
I see you, Irish fan, and I love your comment. And I loved a lot of the comments. I saw lots of great comments. I really appreciate all the comments. I try to stare over there when Tyler gets too long-winded. I go looking through the comments to keep my attention span sharp.
Yeah, then I have to figure out what he was laughing about. And hope it wasn't something I said, unless I meant him to be funny. All right, well, that is it for us tonight. If you're not subscribed to InsideNDSports.com, make sure you take advantage of that 30-day free trial. Use the code NDYT. You sign up for free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge message board, where we spend loads and loads of time. There's a link to sign up to that in this video description. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here, Eric?
Thank you to Legacy Heating and Air. Thank you to the music industry and Tracy Chapman.
I wanted you to give your Grammy speech. Thank you to my manager.
If they would let me be on the Grammys, I would. I don't know what I could bring to it.
Who was I think it was the Oscars. There was someone who looked like you that won an Oscar. Do you remember that years ago?
Yeah, I mean, they put it on Twitter. There was somebody that won an Oscar. I don't know who that was, but Obviously a talented individual and a handsome guy.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning
And
in.
an old guy.
We'll be live again next Monday. Look for Inside Indy Sports podcast later this week. All right. Have a good week.